This is a remarkable congregation. You have so many people who, through their time, talent, treasure, donate to Hope and to other community projects. And this doesn't happen in every congregation, and certainly not at the level of the Tampa congregation. I visit a great many churches and fellowships in Florida, and this particular one, you are very impressive. I'm very grateful, and I can only say again and again, thank you, thank you, thank you, all of you. What you're doing is courageous, it's generous, and it is very much needed in Florida right now. Thank you. And thank you also. Now, should I say a few words? Okay. These words are from Erich. It was written, "My heart is moved by all that I cannot save. So much has been recently destroyed. I have to cast my lot with those people who age after age, perversely and with no extraordinary power, reconstitute the world." That's you. I'm very grateful. And I think Adrian Rich would be very grateful also. Thank you. Theme of creating justice, and I suppose we can use terms like resistance and resilience as well. We have a responsive reading, and it's in your insert. And now I'm looking for my insert. Do you have a copy? Thank you. All right. I have a lot of paperwork up here today, so please bear with me. Okay. The custom is I do the first few words and we join together for the italics. And the words, of course, are from Frederick Douglass. "Those who profess to favor freedom and yet deprecate agitation are people who want crops without plowing up the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its waters." This struggle may be a moral one, or it may be both moral and physical, but it must be a struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, it never will. Find out what people will submit to, and you have found out the exact amount of injustice which will be imposed upon them. Limits and currents are prescribed towards those within rest. Words from well over 100 years ago, but still very appropriate in today's situation. You'll find those words in your gray hymn book if you're curious where they come from. Now, our first hymn that we're going to sing together is 152 in the gray book. And there's lots of legends about this particular song. And once again, you can choose what you want, believe what you want, but many storytellers say this is a song about the Underground Railroad, and may have its origins way back in the 1830s, 1840s, when Frederick Douglass was still a young man. And there's a lot of, I guess I could say, secret language or coded language that's included in the hymn. It has to do with how do you get to safety? What are the guiding stars in the heavens that you can follow? So there's a reference to the old man, for example. Well, the old man isn't a person. The old man is a constellation up in the sky who helps to point the way to the north and towards freedom. So this is an old song, and we'll sing it together. We remember the Underground Railroad from days long ago, but new underground railroads are also being established in today's world. Underground railroads help to protect trans people, undocumented migrants, women searching for medical care, homeless people. There's lots of people involved with the Underground Railroad in the 21st century. Some of them might even appear in this building. Let's sing the song. The Underground Railroad is sort of coming together once again. And we need to stay together, and we need to help people who come to this congregation in search of sanctuary, help with transportation, housing, maybe some good charts or maps that'll help to get them to safety. We'll see what happens. Well, some of you will go home today, and friends and family who are not present in this hour will say, well, you know, what did the minister talk about? What did he say? Could you summarize it? Maybe just a couple of words. I can go back and watch TV or whatever. Watch a podcast. And you can say, well, the minister said that many people are frightened by freedom. Frightened by freedom. Well, what does that mean? Well, he said that many people say that they want to be free, and of course we celebrate freedom on the 4th of July, and some of you may have celebrated on Bastille Day, July 14th. Liberty, equality, fraternity, right? So we want freedom. Many people say that they do, but then they're not really sure what that means or what that requires. So, you know, can we just sort of get freedom for free without really having to make much effort? And if we were liberated, well, what would that look like? What would that happen if we suddenly had responsibility for our own lives and for caring for others? What if we call that freedom? Well, that involves responsibility, and that can be kind of scary. So that's part of what the minister is going to say in the next few minutes. There it is, liberty, equality, fraternity. Okay, those of you who speak French, you'll probably get the right pronunciation. So what else does the minister want to say, or what did he say? He used the past tense for this afternoon. Well, the minister said, well, we need a revolution, and we need resistance, we need rebellion. We need to change things. We need to change things as fast as we can, because we've entered into some very difficult times. Kim has mentioned this experience of the in-between times. Something has happened in this country, really just within the last 12 months or so, and we're not really sure where we're headed. We're not sure what's going to happen next or what we want, but there is a sense that we want change. We're not satisfied, many of us, with the existing order of things. Some of these proposals coming out of the White House, out of Congress, out of Tallahassee, from other places, big corporations, we're not so sure that this is what we want to accept as we try to make our progress towards what we often call the beloved community. We talk about revolution. Well, that can mean all kinds of things. We've got fireworks. They're on display right now on the screen. Could mean change in economics, certainly culture, politics, all of the above. But as Unitarian Universalists, we often go a little bit deeper than all of that. We want social change, but we want something that is much more basic, something, well, I'm going to use the word spiritual, this term spiritual transformation. We can get into questions about emotion and psychology, things that go very deep indeed. Spiritual transformation. There have been many spiritual revolutionaries in history. We could certainly mention Gandhi, Buddha, Mohammed. There are many others, some of them not so well known. All of them trying to get us to move in the right sort of way, to care about each other, to try to create a better world for future generations. I'm going to talk about one of these spiritual revolutionaries. And it's a story that comes from a very famous novel, so you'll recognize it. The Brothers Karamazov. How many of you read that literature class? Oh, a few did, okay. By Fyodor Dostoevsky, great Russian novelist from the 1800s. Bit of a radical. He got into all kinds of trouble for all kinds of reasons back in Tsarist Russia. The story that he tells is actually part of a much larger book. The story, it's almost a story within a story. Actually, he actually said a poem within a story. And maybe you'll agree with that. And it's called The Grand Inquisitor. And I'm going to summarize it as best I can, but you can read the full text online if you're so inclined. This is a story about a revolutionary who's in the wrong place at the wrong time. The story goes like this. We're talking about the 1500s, and this is in Spain. Specifically, it's in Seville. And when we look at the 1500s in Spain, we're really looking at what we would call Christian nationalism nowadays, all right? Christian nationalism. Because church and state are intertwined like this. They rely on each other to control the people, to keep them in their place. And at this particular moment in the 1500s, Seville is celebrating the Spanish Inquisition. So they brought in the grand old man who's in his 90s, the Grand Inquisitor. Okay, so this is one of the leading church figures. He's been around for a long time, and he knows how to run the Inquisition right. First of all, you round up anybody who looks suspect. So anybody who looks like a Jew or a Muslim or a free thinker or a witch, don't think about a witch, they're going to look for witches. Anybody who seems rebellious for any reason, who doesn't quite follow the way things are supposed to be as dictated by church and state together. You round them up, you put them on trial, and then the ones you don't like, who get convicted, what do you think happens to them? They get burned at the stake, okay? Not a very pleasant outcome. And on this particular day, they have burned about 100 people in Seville. And this is what one variety of Christian nationalism might look like. We're going to burn 100 people because they're not like us. Maybe a few gypsies. We'll throw a few gypsies or Romanite people into the mix. Now, while church and state are celebrating this accomplishment, something totally unexpected happens. The great revolutionary shows up. And the great revolutionary is none other than Jesus of Nazareth. All right, okay. He has come back from the grave or wherever he's gone to. Jesus comes back after 1,500 years. And he doesn't really say a lot in this story. He says very little. But he just sort of quietly goes through Seville. He's in the cathedral square at several points. And he talks with people very gently. He's a very calming influence. And he heals people. There's one gentleman who's been blind for a long time, and Jesus helps him to see. And this is a miracle. And there is a child that has recently died, and Jesus raises the girl from the dead. He performs all kinds of miracles, and he reassures people that things can be okay. Just sort of look out for each other and just be with each other. And this causes some problems. And the Grand Inquisitor himself, with all his bodyguards and soldiers and servants and whole retinue, they come to Jesus and they say, "We know who you are. You're under arrest. You're in the wrong place at the wrong time." So Jesus is tossed into a very lonely dungeon. And late at night, the Grand Inquisitor comes to visit Jesus. And he says Jesus, the problem with you has always been you talk about freedom. You encourage people to think for themselves. You encourage them to find their own way. You tolerate all kinds of deviant people, all kinds of minorities, dissidents, and difficult folks. You seem to love everybody, and you encourage them to just do the right thing. Now, I'm paraphrasing. I can tell you the language is a lot more flowery than this, and it's straight out of 19th century Russia, so I'm simplifying it a bit. But essentially, this is what the Grand Inquisitor says, as translated for this morning, okay? And Jesus doesn't say a word in response, but he just looks very carefully into the eyes of the Grand Inquisitor. Grand Inquisitor says initially, and tomorrow you're going to be executed because we can't tolerate your behavior here. The church gives people what they really want, and they don't want freedom. What people want, most of them anyway, is security. They want to know the, quote, right thing to do, and they want to be told the right thing to do. And of course, they want material things. They want bread, other necessities. But they don't want ambivalence. They don't want freedom of choice. They don't want deviation. They may want oppression, but they don't want freedom. And that's what we try to do as church leaders. Well, we're talking about Seville in the 1500s, of course. And Jesus, you just never understood what it was that humanity is really all about. Jesus doesn't say a word. And the Grand Inquisitor hesitates and says, you got a reprieve. Now just get out of here and don't come back, okay? Don't you ever come back. This is going to be a church without Jesus. Freedom is not the message that we're going to preach, because that's not what most people want. Most people are afraid of freedom. They're frightened. And Jesus stands up to the Inquisitor, and just like he did with Judas, he gives him a single kiss, and he leaves. And according to the story, he hasn't been seen since, or at least not in that part of Spain. So that's a story about rebellion, I suppose, about freedom, and why it is that Jesus isn't wanted in much of Christianity. And there's more to the story, and you can read it at your leisure. The language is much more eloquent than I can present. Last week, I received 3 messages, but before I tell you about the 3 messages, I'm going to explain that I'm wearing a black apron. Well, that's pretty obvious to many of you. And it says, "Side with Love." I spoke at our General Assembly in June. That's the National Convention for Unitarian Universalists. And I actually got up at one point and delivered a brief, 3-minute sermon or whatever it was. And I wore this black apron. And I said, the reason I wear this apron, well, it symbolizes for many people this need to get to work. Just get down to the basics. Put yourself into the good struggle because it's needed right now. Not a long dissertation or another manifesto or a study commission that goes for 3 or 4 years. There's a need for immediate action. And that's what this apron symbolizes. If you're a baker or a cook or an artist activist, or I'm going to say mason or a construction worker, you know what aprons are all about. They're a symbol of working people who try to get things done in the right sort of way. I received 3 messages last week. The first message came from Pinellas County. I live in St. Petersburg. And the message, maybe you got a similar message here in Hillsborough. I'm not always sure what's going on over here. Message from Pinellas County says, extreme heat advisory. This is the email message. Temperatures this weekend and into early next week may go as high as 108 degrees Fahrenheit, maybe even as high as 112 degrees Fahrenheit. Extreme caution is advised. And then there's a message that goes with it about things that people can do to take care of themselves. And I'm thinking, 108 to 112 degrees Fahrenheit? That's not hot enough to fry an egg on a sidewalk, but it's getting pretty close. And this is how we live now. We expect this sort of thing by email. Each summer is hotter than the previous summer. The sea continues to rise. Heat waves have become routine in most of the country. People worry about flash floods. They worry about tornadoes, wildfires. This is how we live now. We ask the existential question, well, what are we supposed to do about any of this? What can we do? What's possible? Now, some of our Quaker friends, Lynn and I are sometimes involved with Quakers over in St. Petersburg, have responded by making sandwiches for homeless people and distributing drinking water. And I'm very impressed by that. I'm very grateful for what the Quakers are doing. And they work with Roman Catholics and evangelical Protestants. Somehow these different groups are able to come together to try to be useful in the community. Lynn and I went to a community garden in South St. Petersburg. Volunteers were working together despite the heat to grow organic food that can be distributed in the community at community meals, other occasions. And once again, there was plenty of drinking water required. A little first aid station was established. All of these things happening in the midst of a long, hot, and difficult summer. And somehow they're reassuring that people can still meet the moment, that we can still come forward to care for each other, even in the midst of a difficult season. And sad to say, you look around and you find that many congregations are not meeting the moment. Many churches have closed because of the hot weather. Some of the clergy have disappeared for a 2 or 3 month vacation. Maybe they'll be back in the fall after the hot weather has passed. Some of the national organizations that we're familiar with are really not active at this time of year, despite the flash floods, despite the wildfires, the droughts, the other emergencies that we now associate with July and August and September. So it's interesting to think about the heat advisory, but I think it's even more important to look around to see who's being helpful in this season. Second message received. This was a communique that went out to thousands of people from Betty Osceola. Okay, Betty Osceola is one of the representatives of the Miccosukee tribe down in southern Florida. So Betty Osceola lives in the Everglades. And of course, there are lots of American Indians who live in the American Everglades. She said, we've got a problem down here, and it's called alligator Alcatraz. All right, how many of you are familiar with alligator Alcatraz? Okay, I hope by this point. She says, the governor announced this thing on June 19th, so that's about a month ago, not too long ago. And it all came together very, very quickly in an endangered area in the Everglades. The tents came in, the construction workers, the porta potties, the whole building, the rebuilding of this runway to bring in people who've been detained during ice raids. I'm trying to get a number as to how many people are down there at the moment. It may be 600 at the moment, But some people say it may be as 3,000. Some have even said 5,000 by the end of the calendar year. Now, you all know about the ICE raids. You know that thousands of people in the United States have been rounded up, undocumented migrants, many of them sent off to detention centers at federal expense. But this one is unusual because we suddenly have the governor of Florida using state monies to pull together this facility without any kind of environmental impact review, without much concern for fair conditions, humanitarian conditions. Betty Osceola is concerned about it. There are sacred sites involved for the Indians who live in the Everglades, and they're being threatened. She needs your help. She wants your help. We'll see what we can do in the weeks that follow. The governor wants to use FEMA money. Donald Trump didn't say yes. Donald Trump didn't say no. He was present when the facility was officially dedicated. So we may see FEMA money being used to support a prison, which is unprecedented. And all of these things are things to be concerned about. And then I received a third message, and that was from Pat Benedict and others that said, we're going to recognize volunteers. We're going to recognize all the people in this congregation who are helping other congregations and community groups with affordable housing, with environmental justice, with other issues that have been identified in the community, issues that need immediate attention. We're going to ask people to come forward. We're going to say thank you. And I said, sign me up. I definitely want to be a part of that ceremony, and I'm honored to be here, to be with you, as you make this commitment to social justice, and I would even say spiritual transformation in the midst of a very difficult era. Thank you, and thank you. And that was the third message. Some of you may remember a name from the past, Erich Fromm. How many of you remember Erich Fromm? All right, he was very popular back in the day. That'd be back in the 60s, 70s, even into the 80s, okay? He wrote all kinds of books. He was a remarkable gentleman who was sort of somewhere in between psychoanalysis and sociology, with a lot of philosophy in the mix. He was a German Jew. He's non-religious. He's actually atheist. But he also said he was a mystic. He should have been a Unitarian Universalist, right? Okay. Like many German Jews, he had to leave Germany during the 1930s. He came to the United States, taught in several universities, wrote several books. One of the most famous books was called Escape from Freedom. He said people are frightened by freedom. Certainly in Germany in the 1940s and 30s, they were frightened by freedom. You had a lot of people who wanted to follow Adolf Hitler. They wanted to be told what to do and how to do it and when to do it. And they wanted to know who was really in charge. And no, they didn't want to tolerate deviant groups or people who were unusual or question the system or anything like that. Concentration camps were set aside for people who sort of got out of line. And freedom, well, democracy, things like that, they were very hard to defend in Germany after 1933. And that's what Fromm talked about. He said the only way out of this situation is to go back to the basics. He spoke for democracy. He spoke against hierarchies that get out of hand, out of bureaucracies that don't serve the people. But again and again in Fromm's books, he's talking about spiritual transformation. The need for people to just love each other and to care for each other and to appreciate each other even in the midst of confusion and division, just to do these things. I don't know if anybody else reads Erich Fromm these days, but I do, and I encourage you to rediscover him if you have an old Erich Fromm book, an old bookshelf somewhere, but I'm going to close with some quotes from him. He said in one of his books, if you're not completely alienated, if you remain sensitive and able to feel your emotions, if you're not for sale in the marketplace, if you remain a person and not an object in this society, you may be a healthy person in a world that has become very sick very quickly. You may experience moments of doubt and suffering, but despite it all, you may also experience moments of joy and clarity and freedom. Erich Fromm also said, love is the sane and satisfactory answer to the problem of human existence. Love is the sane and satisfactory answer to the problem of human existence. Stay with love in the midst of confusion, hatred, and alienation, and persecution, in the midst of systemic oppression. Stay with love. Words from Erich Fromm. Words that seem very appropriate for Florida, for all of the United States in the present hour. Shalom. Salam, blessed be, Ashe, go in peace, namaste. Now, we have a final song, and is that correct? Yeah, okay. This is another song from the Gray Hymn Book. It is from Germany. The original version probably written in the 1840s and then rewritten several times. And this particular version, it's an English translation, was popular during the Second World War. And it became a song of resistance. And it's still a song of resistance. And maybe it needs to be rediscovered. Words from Paul Robeson. I shall take my voice wherever there are those who want to hear the melody of freedom or the words that may inspire hope and courage in the face of despair and fear. My songs are peaceful, for it is only by peace that peace can be attained. The songs of freedom must prevail, and they will. Blessed be.